faster than a speeding bullet,
I ran until my muscles burned and my veins pumped battery acid.
more powerful than a locomotive.
An idea is like a virus, resilient, highly contagious.
Able to leap tall buildings in a single bound.
Hey guys, Jared Moon here, and welcome to the Better Humanology podcast. Now, I'm going to keep this intro pretty short because the man we have on today needs very little introduction. His name is Chris Spealler. This guy holds himself to a very high set of standards as a coach, as an athlete, as a father, as a husband, man, just as a better human being. I had a blast chatting with him. I'm going to read his quick bio just in case anyone doesn't know who Chris Spealler is, and then we're going to hop right into the interview. So Chris was an individual competitor in 7 CrossFit games. He's an affiliate owner, and he is the trainer for CrossFit headquarters, teaching a variety of seminars, both domestic and internationally. He has been fortunate enough to help grow the sport of CrossFit through competing and teaching at a variety of competitions and seminars from as early as 2007. So he is an OG CrossFitter, and he's currently sharing his knowledge and experience through programming and developing for icon athletes. So with multiple roles he plays in the community, he's a true ambassador for CrossFit. He lives in Park City, Utah with his wife, 2 kids, and their dogs, Oakley and Avalanche. While he's not running the affiliate at home or traveling for seminars and coaching athletes, he puts his fitness to use skiing, mountain biking, and trying to keep up with his kids. All right, guys, enjoy this one. Here is Chris Spealler. All right, Chris, I want to welcome you to the Better Humanology podcast, man. I am so pumped to be talking to you today. Thank you so much for being on.
Thanks, man. I appreciate having me.
And everyone who listens to the podcast knows that, you know, we throw everyone right into the fire as soon as we start. We like to get the blood moving and people going and, you know, challenged for their week ahead. So if I could throw it to you this week, and we start with a fitness challenge for me and all the listeners out there.
Oh, yeah. So we actually just did one with Icon Athlete through Beyond the Whiteboard, and I think it fits kind of both of those physical and mental things. It was a workout. It was as many rounds as possible in 10 minutes, 10 squat cleans at 95 pounds, and 10 chest to bar pull-ups. And man, I did the first round, and I remember looking at the clock and thinking, holy crap, I have a lot of time left. So both mentally and physically, it's kind of a fun one, real simple because it's not real heavy. And, you know, people, even with just kind of a moderately kind of beginner baseline of fitness, can take a crack at it. So that's kind of a fun one for people to maybe give a shot and see how it goes.
Yeah, man, and that's those deceptively simple ones are probably the worst most of the time.
So rugged, yeah.
All right, dude. So next one is a book recommendation. Is there a book you could recommend for me and the listeners?
You know, for me, I'll be honest, I'm not a huge book guy. I'm such a hands-on learner. I really enjoy that. And I enjoy like podcasts and listening to things like that. So books, I don't dig into them that much. But there's one, I just like the storyline. My faith plays a large role in my life. And there's a book called The Shack. And I actually think they're coming out with a movie, which I'm curious to see. But I really dig the book. I like the storyline. And just kind of answers some, or helps to at least kind of have thought-provoking questions on some big theology stuff. And it's in a really cool format, just storyline. So it's for me, it was a really easy read and one that I enjoyed.
Perfect, man. I'll check it out. Thanks for the recommendation.
Yeah.
All right, man. Let's now that we got that out of the way, let's give the listeners, for those who don't know, a better idea about who you are, what you're doing now, maybe a little bit of your background, where we get a good sense of everything.
Yeah. What do you want me to kind of start from the beginning? What do you think?
You know, I always leave this completely open-ended. Let's go with as far back as you want to. If you don't go far back enough, I'm going to start peeling the onion one piece at a time. But wherever
Perfect.
you feel like your journey really started into becoming, pretty much one of the greatest CrossFit Games athletes of all time to today and all of that.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I guess, ultimately it started as a kid unknowingly. I was always into athletics and fitness. I remember being a little kid and just dying to want to go to the gym with my dad. And at that time it was like, not the Nautilus gym down the street was kind of like the hot new thing. And they had all those blue Nautilus machines with like the chain things. It was just like, I remember going in there at probably 12 and working out a little bit with my dad and just thinking how cool it was. And sport was a huge role in my life. I did everything from wrestling was like the true passion and love and what I spent the most amount of time. But I also played lacrosse. I ran track. I played soccer. I even played golf for a year in high school, like all sorts of stuff. So sport was a big role in shaping me. And when I was in high school, my dad, I remember, asked me, he's like, hey, you can kind of make a choice here. He said, you can continue to do a bunch of different things. Because at the time, I think I was wrestling and playing lacrosse and running track. And he said, if you want, you can continue to do what you do and just try to be good at everything, which is fine. And he said, or if you want, you can choose one thing and try to be like the best at it. And I remember sitting on the couch thinking, like, man, how cool would it be to be one of the best at what you do? So that kind of morphed into me focusing only on wrestling. And that was when I was probably a junior in high school. And that was a big shift. So year round, just wrestling constantly, and my training revolved around that. And then I went to college. I wrestled in college and had a great experience there, a really challenging experience through 5 years because I redshirted my freshman year, and really challenging, but also like a real growing period as an athlete and as a person. And then I had about 4 years where I kind of ski bummed it in Utah and had no idea what I was going to do with my life. And one thing led to another, and a buddy of mine introduced me to CrossFit, and I stumbled into it on the website, and some other friends of mine kind of called me out and asked me what I wanted to do. And I said open a gym, but I didn't think I could. And they really just encouraged me and helped me along that way. And I started doing CrossFit, and I was fortunate enough to be a part of it from the start. So I basically grew with CrossFit, I guess you could say, especially from the games, because that's when I started getting into it in 2006 and 2007. And and that was just a really good transition period for me, where I went from essentially kind of being this lost ski bum that missed wrestling and really struggled a little bit with identity and what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be. And CrossFit kind of filled, in a way, a little bit of that void of giving me some passion back with fitness and more so sport. I missed the sport, and it just naturally turned into that. So 10 years later, and here we are.
That's incredible, man. I could see how CrossFit is so appealing if you're like, you want to kind of be in every single sport, and try to be as best as you can be at each and every single one of them. That's like CrossFit like gave the proving grounds for being best at a lot of different, or being as good as you can at a lot of different things, right? And I want to hop back before we talk about maybe your competitive career or CrossFit or anything. And you said that during wrestling is a very challenging time and really helped you develop as an athlete. What do you think? What experiences did you have that really helped you grow and develop there?
Oh man, it's funny. I did a podcast with Bill Grunler. For those of you guys that don't know Bill, he is he does a bunch of the announcing for the CrossFit Games, and he's a wrestler like myself. And we had a completely biased conversation on how wrestling is so much harder than CrossFit. And I think wrestling, it's kind of, and again, this is coming from a wrestler, so maybe take it with a grain of salt, but I think it is hands down probably the most difficult sport when it comes to both mental and physical training, because both, the team relies on you because it's a team sport in some ways, but it's also largely individual, and everything from making weight to training outside of wrestling to time inside the wrestling room, having wrestle-offs to earn your spot, having to fight for your spot if it gets challenged for. I mean, that's all before you even get out on the mat, and then you get out on the mat and it's just you and this other dude, and you can't blame it on anybody else, and your performance is up to you. But unlike other sports where, CrossFit is a good example. It's kind of that individual sport, and in some ways it can be team and individual, but no one's trying to stop me from doing what I'm doing. Like, I just get to go out there and work as hard as I can. Where in wrestling, there's someone that's on the other side of the mat that's like physically trying to stop you
Right.
from doing it. Wrestling, I think, there's no better way or no better thing that could have prepared me for what I did with CrossFit. And part of that was just the experience that I had going into school. I was basically recruited to Lock Haven University, but not as like a scholarship athlete. And when I went there, I was not on any scholarship, but they wanted me to be a part of the team. And at my weight class, there was a kid, a good guy, and he was a 4-time state champ, and he was on a full ride, and he was in my weight class. And there were other guys that, were older than myself, and Trap, the other guy that was the 4-time state champ. And so I walked into like a really unfavorable setting for me to get into a varsity spot with a kid that's a 4-time state champ and, just more senior guys. And I definitely had to battle to earn a spot on that team. And it took me 3 years. And some of that time, honestly, was really difficult. And it helped shape me into the person that I am today.
I don't have any wrestling experience, but I've interviewed a lot of people, and over the years, that is almost a commonality I've seen pop out. Is like I've seen some really high-class, world-class entrepreneurs, and they have a wrestling background. Really high-class, world-class athletes, they have a wrestling background. And then I see that when I was in the military, they did this giant study in special operations, and they were trying to determine, what attributes or qualities do high school students have that are going to best, indicate that someone would finish training to be a Navy SEAL. And they couldn't come up with a lot of different things. They tested every single metric possible, and there are only 2 things that they really popped out with, and that was if you lived kind of in a colder climate and you're around that often, and 2, wrestling background.
That's interesting.
So I think it's really crazy. I wish now, going back, like you as an adult, you can't really probably experience all that is involved in being part of a wrestling team. But man, it seems like it's an incredible place to be, or to maybe consider putting your children if you want to help them build mental toughness or things like that. So I do see that commonality, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's cool. That's a huge reason why I want my son to wrestle. I'm just like, even if he doesn't stick with it, I just want him to learn, to experience it, because I think it's just such a valuable sport for that.
And I feel like you kind of took that mentality into CrossFit, because you didn't always have it the easiest. You didn't have anything handed to you in the CrossFit games. Can you talk about, so your size specifically, going up against some of the other guys, do you think that is what got you through, or is it certain training? Is it a combination of both? Like, how are you able to compete with guys, a lot bigger than you, given your circumstance?
Yeah, I think it's definitely both, but I don't think the training would have been possible had, I would not had the right mindset. And for whatever reason, and I think this is part of what I experienced when I was in college in wrestling, is I liked playing the role of the underdog. I didn't mind it. I liked it. And it motivated me in a lot of ways when people would kind of count me out or didn't think I could do it. And that it didn't necessarily bother me. I think I learned how to handle that and cope with that through wrestling. And that almost played to my advantage. So there is a piece of that mentality. And then there's this other thing where I don't know why. I can't say why. I don't know necessarily what the quality is or where it comes from. But often when I look at, and this is more when I was, competing at a high level of competition, because the goals have changed now. But when I was there, I would often look at, a lot of the bigger guys and see them toss around weight and do stuff and not even question it. I would just think to myself, well, man, if they're doing that, I should be able to do that. And it wasn't even like this, they should be good at it because they're big. There were a few random things, but for the most part, I was just like, man, well, if they're doing it, I don't have any excuse. And I don't know why necessarily I had that mentality, but I did. And I don't think I can't put my finger on why, but it just was there.
And another thing that I wanted to point out, this is kind of just a personal question. I believe it was, and you correct me if I'm wrong, it was 2013 we got regionals, right? And the no rep fiasco, was that 2013?
Oh yeah.
And to be honest, I already had an enormous amount of respect for you going into that. And then once I saw your reaction and the fact that you kept cool through that entire process, you're better than 9 out of 10 human beings who would have been in the same situation. How do you keep your cool in situations like that?
Oh man, it is hard. It's difficult. But I think you also have to accept it. That's just part of sport. And if people can't handle that and they can't keep their head in the game, then they're not going to be the best competitor that they can be. And there are times where things are outside of our control. And sometimes those things can be a judge. It's not like sport and competition is not always fair. And I think people try to make it as fair as they can, but it's just the reality of the situation. It's just not always fair. So it's one of those things that at the time, although it might be frustrating, you can't control it. So you need to learn how to handle that as best as you can. And again, I can go back to wrestling with things like that and the experiences that I had that I was able to kind of keep my cool. And I remember training in wrestling where our coaches would do stuff that to us on purpose just to keep our head in the game. So when we would be practicing, they would essentially on purpose have, a bad call or a bad judgment, and they would tell us we had to stay in there or that we were down a point or 2 points when we really weren't. We had earned it. And so we kind of learned how to cope with it in the wrestling room. And I do think it's a learned thing. And I do think that athletes that know how to deal with it are much more capable than those that don't know how to deal with it.
Do you think that's something that should be thrown into, like your wrestling coach did? Do you think that should be thrown in with competitive CrossFitters today? Their coaches doing that to them?
That's a good question because I think if an athlete struggles with that, I think it's worth maybe taking a look at occasionally. But I also think that there are times, where I'm doing a workout, if I'm just training, and let's say I'm doing a set of 50 wall ball. If 2 of my wall balls don't touch the target exactly where I think they maybe should, sometimes I'll just keep going for the sake of getting the response of the workout. And just because I know that if I keep moving, that it's going to be harder than if I would actually stop and redo the rep or whatever that is. So I think part of it depends on what your goal is. And if an athlete struggles with that, then I do think it's valuable to maybe expose them to environments or situations where that could happen so they can learn how to deal with that mentally if it does happen when it really does matter.
And what about your everyday CrossFitter in the gym? Do you think you should ever throw curveballs at them like that?
I don't think so. I mean, for the people that are in our gym, I think it's largely about making it the best hour of their day, right? And chances are they don't need us in their face telling them that every wall ball doesn't count or, it's like
making their day worse.
I think you might have a pretty dwindling clientele if that's your approach with everybody.
Yeah, maybe just once a year or something like that, just to save it for special occasions.
For sure.
I'm going to shift gears on you here for a minute. This question, I really love giving it to my guests. So say there's a nationwide curriculum implemented, and the president calls you up, and he says you're responsible for one chapter of the book. So every single child in America will have to read your chapter and be tested on it and pass before they're allowed to graduate high school and pursue further education. What would your chapter be about?
Oh my gosh. That's legit. So I get to write a chapter in the book, and they have to essentially graduate from the topic that I'm writing.
Yep.
Man, that's a great question. I think communication.
Okay.
Like learning how to communicate with people in an effective manner. Like what does that look like? Because I think most people fear conflict or confrontation when it doesn't have to be maybe what our perceptions are. And I think that that applies toward oh my gosh, just, everything. It can apply toward leadership. It can apply toward, um, business. It can apply toward athletics, toward academics. And I think if people know how to effectively communicate, then they're one step ahead of the rest of the crowd.
And has that been something that you like actively work on or have been working on for over the years?
I think I've gotten better at it because I've been put in situations where are just challenging, right? And I think that it's easy for us to see others' reaction to conflict and resolution, and it's easy for us to see, when people disagree, if things get heated and people start yelling, or freaking out at one another. I just think that's really unproductive. And I think that if people know how to communicate and they can be, big kid about it, that a lot can get done as opposed to us perceiving conversations in the way they should be. So yeah, I'm always trying to work on that stuff, but I've been put in situations before where I've failed miserably at that, and where I've also probably done okay at that, and the end result is much, much better, much more effective.
All right, awesome. I think that'd be a good chapter.
Thanks, man.
All right, so I'm going to go back to training for a minute, because one thing when I have someone of your caliber on the podcast, there's the tendency for, the person I'm interviewing to be like, yeah, so you specifically CrossFit Games 7 times, and just be like, and here I am today type situation.
Sure.
And we kind of got the, kind of where your mental toughness and drive came from, maybe wrestling in your background, and having to go through a lot of challenges. And then we also got the fact that, you were a smaller guy, physically, which, just pushed you, and that was almost just part of it. But what was kind of the biggest challenge over the course of those 7 years? And I mean, I'm talking about, barring those two things, I'm talking about anything. And it literally could be any challenge you felt like you had throughout that process. What would it be?
Man, that is another good question. I think are we talking the course of the 7 years when I went to the games?
Yeah, let's do that.
I think let's see. I think probably one of the more challenging things I faced was, I think it could be argued, I look at it a couple different ways, like balance, right? It didn't exist. You can prioritize, but I think that's different than balance. And one of the harder things in that season in my life was essentially running a gym, working for CrossFit headquarters, and traveling every weekend and competing in CrossFit at that level. And you prioritize those things, and that has an effect on the rest of your life and your relationships and your work. And that was a choice that I made that I don't regret by any means. But because of my situation, and because through that time I was married and had, for most of it, I had 2 kids, and I had a business through all that, and I worked for CrossFit headquarters. That was just that dynamic was really challenging. It's different now, I think. I don't think many people that are out on the floor are in that position. I think last year they said there was 1 or 2 athletes that had kids, and no one else had kids. I'm like, no kidding. It's like, it's a tremendous, and I say this because I was there, and I don't mean it in a negative way. It's a tremendously selfish lifestyle. And I think that could be said for any elite athlete or any, like any genius or any, not saying I was a genius by any means, but anybody that dedicates their lives to something like that, or like music or whatever it is, I think it has the potential to be a pretty selfish lifestyle.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, that's one of the biggest drawing factors to me following you over the years, because granted, I'm somewhat impressed with somebody who can, dedicate their whole life to something and be the best. But I'm, exponentially more impressed because I'm a father. I have 2 kids. I run my business full time, and then I train, and so I understand that. So it's when I see someone, like you, who was, I got you 2 kids. You're still trying to be the best husband, the best father. You run a business, and you're still competing. Maybe that's not even possible today with like just everyone who's come on board and has sponsorships and all this other stuff. But I think that balance is a really difficult thing. And what do you think that the biggest struggle was with the balance? Do you think you had to make just like really hard choices between training and family, or was it just both kind of suffered? Where was that for you?
Yeah, I think both suffered a little bit. I think largely it was between training and family and the affiliate. And the affiliate suffered the most, hands down. The affiliate suffered the most through that season. After that, I would say it was more just the dynamic of my attitude when I was home. And that's something that I'm sure I could have been better about. But I think a lot of us can relate to this. Even now, I don't think people have to be, an elite athlete to relate to this. But I think when you have more invested, it's just harder. And that is, when you have a good workout, well, then you're in a good mood. If you had a bad workout, then you're in a bad mood. Or all you're thinking about is, I can't wait to go back in the gym tomorrow and redeem myself. And those were things that I battled with a lot through those, I would say kind of mainly from 2012 to 2014, 12, 13, and 14 were when I really battled with those the most. And I think that's just because I knew that I was so kind of far behind the 8 ball with the strength and the numbers that had gone up that I didn't feel like I had a lot of room for error. I had to stay the best at what I was already good at, and then I had to bring everything else up. And that was challenging, to say the least. And I think there are times where I was pretty preoccupied mentally and not very engaged with my family like I would have liked to have been, or like I enjoy being now.
Yeah, so it's that ripple effect. I never really thought about that, but that's a great point. I can definitely relate to that 100%. Have a bad day in business, and then my relationship suffer later that day. It's just kind of how it goes. And you're talking about your training, having to stay the best at what you're already good at, and then bring everything else up. It reminds me of a quote. Maybe you've heard it. Find your weaknesses, make friends with them, then beat them to death.
Yeah.
And anyone who doesn't listen, who doesn't know who said that on the podcast, it was Chris. So can you tell me about that? That mentality, I guess. And do you do that outside of training in life?
Yeah, I think it's different in life. In business, I think it's different. In business, I think that I've started to realize I know where my strengths are. I know where my weaknesses are, and where my weaknesses are, I don't think there's a lot of value in me trying to get better at those. I think it's important that I recognize those, and then that I can delegate to have people do those things more effectively than me. So I think that, and maybe I could be entirely wrong, but that's kind of been my take in the business side of things. Now, as a dad and a husband, that's completely different. And for me, I think recognizing kind of shortcomings there and what that looks like, and trying to improve upon that 100%. That's definitely something that I try to work on, and that could be patience with a 5-year-old that needs to change their pants 4 times and their shoes 3 times before they walk out the door because they're, just a 5-year-old. And I better get better at that stuff. But not as much in business. I don't think it has quite as much carryover as I would see in training, for sure.
Okay. And what does your training look like today? So we've kind of covered the part of the journey that was the 7 times at the CrossFit Games. And what are you doing now? What's training look like today? What are you training for?
Yeah, I train for life. It's great. I work out an hour a day, and I love to try to work out with my class if I can. Some days my schedule doesn't necessarily allow that. Other days it does. And I enjoy that. I enjoy working out with my community and Sometimes that's doing workouts here just at CrossFit Park City. Other times that's doing icon workouts that we have programmed. So there's a lot of opportunity for me to kind of be involved there. And I usually do that. Today I'll probably have to train by myself, just time wise, and squeeze it in. But yeah, I'm like an hour a day guy, and I try to be really smart with my training. I train so that I can ski and ride my bike hard because I like to do those things. And now if I find that my training starts to affect those things, I have to really adjust the volume and tweak the loading and things like that so I can live and enjoy life outside of the gym, where previously that was definitely not the mentality.
So you're saying like if too much barbell volume is affecting your day at the slopes, you're gonna decrease the barbell volume? Is that what you're saying?
I don't really I don't really care necessarily. I'm not one of those guys where we have people here that are, like, oh, I'm going to skip doing legs today so I can enjoy the powder day. I'm kind of like, screw that. I'll just go smash myself in the gym and up on the hill. I don't really care about that. But just from things that I've done in the past, if I start to get like, pain, body aches, like knee issues or hip or back, if I start to experience that, that's where I'll start to back off. But I don't really care if there's much conflict there. I just do it and enjoy it.
Dude, how awesome is Utah? This is a completely side note.
Gosh.
I see your Instagram and stuff. I'm like, man, I didn't know that much about Utah. Then I started following Chris Spealler on Instagram, and I want to move there, like right now.
Yeah. Everybody's like, Utah's weird. It sucks. I'm like, yeah, it does. Stay away, especially Park City. I hate it. It's awesome, man. It's such a cool state. I think people completely underestimate it, and like I said, that's fine with me. And go ahead and stay put because I love it, man. Like up north is really mountainous, and where I live, we have 3 ski resorts. I can literally see one of them outside the windows from the gym, and we have like hundreds of miles of single track for riding your mountain bike and bike parks and all sorts of stuff. And then you can drive 4 hours south and it looks like you're on the moon, man. You're just like in the middle of the desert or in Moab, or it's cool off-roading trails and climbing. It's just, man, it's such a cool state. It really is.
That's awesome, man. That's, really that's how I feel today too, is like, that's kind of what my training is preparing me for, those kind of things, the life events, the fun stuff outside. That's stuff I enjoy as well.
Yeah, without a doubt.
All right, man. So I want to talk about CrossFit for a minute because you have been with CrossFit for a long time, and I want to get a bird's eye view from you on your take on the evolution of CrossFit from when you first got in to what it is today.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's vastly different. And everything from the way that affiliates are run and the way the spaces that they are in and that maybe they should be in, and the quality of training that is required, the stereotype that might be behind it now, to the games and the corporate side of CrossFit. And I mean, it's so different. It's so different that I almost can't even find a way to explain how different it is within that short of a period of time. The closest thing I could relate it to is, and I think this is on all sides of the spectrum when we think of CrossFit and the growth and headquarters and affiliates, is the first CrossFit Games was literally, I think it was 60 or 80 people, top 60 people. And it was literally in the dirt, and it was like a barbecue. We had barbecues fired up at the end of day one, and we're having hamburgers and hot dogs.
That's awesome.
At the end of day one on a ranch in the middle of California it was in the middle of nowhere. It's so out there. So that's where it started. And now think about what it looks like when it's at the StubHub Center, what Madison will look like, and the spectacle that it has become, and TV and, sponsorships, and it's just insane. It's so different. And I think that it's like that in a lot of ways, in a lot of areas. And the community, I think, is still like-minded. And I think the community is still present, and I think people appreciate it. But I do think that it has been affected by the CrossFit Games, and I don't always think it's been affected in the best way. And I don't have an answer to how to control that, because I think that the games are kind of like the freight train, and CrossFit is just like a hood ornament on the front of it, just kind of going for a ride with it.
Yeah, and that's the one just small evolution I've seen personally is, and maybe I get your thoughts on this, is the CrossFit Open. So I competed in the very first one. I know you did as well, but I think it was either the first Open or the second Open where, I think it was the first where it was like 7 minutes of burpees.
Yeah,
everyone can do it. Your dog can do it. Like, let's get in here. Let's have some fun. Let's compete. Really. Throw out that, as Greg Glassman used to say, I got to throw out the biggest net possible, to really find the fittest human being on the planet. And now I feel like that net, while maybe open to every single person on the planet Earth, is getting more restricted from a movement standpoint, from a difficulty standpoint. And so they had to break up all these different divisions and scaled and all this stuff. What are your thoughts on that evolution?
Yeah, I think the evolution of the open and the accessibility to people has actually increased. So I think that's been a good thing because they do have a scaled option. And I know it's funny, my wife was saying the other day that people were like freaking out that there were pull-ups, and they were like the scaled version. And I was like, but you're in a fitness competition. If you sign up for a fitness competition and you can't do a pull-up, that's okay. That's totally cool, right? And I admire people that sign up regardless of ability and they throw their hat in the ring and they throw down. I love it. What I think is kind of interesting, though, is when people get angry about it. It's like, but there's a pull-up. And I'm like, yeah, but it is a fitness competition, and they still offer scaled options and they still provide things. So I think that you're right. It has evolved, and maybe things are a little bit challenging, but hey, they can still post a score. They could still do the lunges and the cleans, and they could still do knee raises. I think the difference, though, that I think of is the perception that people have and the training volume people assume they need, and the way affiliates maybe feel like they need to be run. I worry that that is largely affected by the games and games athletes because people see it and they're like, oh, well, that's what that guy does. That's what I need to do. Or that's that guy's goal, so that should be my goal. That must be the way it is. Or that affiliate has a really competitive team, so I should have one. And those are things that I think are completely unnecessary because I think just like you and I know, Jared, the person that doesn't have a pull-up and is busting their butt and doing ring rows and squatting to a ball and they lose 60 pounds and get off their meds, that's the inspiring person. Yeah. Not necessarily Rich Froning again.
And I think that's the most powerful part of CrossFit and just how it all started. And I mean, that's what I really got into the community right at the beginning and learned all these things about nutrition and correct movement and all these things I didn't know, and it was just amazing. It was an amazing start. But then I did see that shift, and maybe, everyone's perception is a little bit different affiliates I've been to where they're like, yeah, we're putting a team together and this is the competitors program. And like, certain people start to get alienated and whatnot. And I'm not, I'm just kind of agreeing with you there that I've seen that happen. But at the same time, it's both sides of the coin is, yes, super accessible, but ultimately they are trying to find the fittest person on the planet. That is
for sure.
That is the goal. So obviously some of those tests should be harder. And yeah, it's a nice weed out process as the time goes on, but it has been really interesting to watch the evolution. But I'm with you on the person who comes in, busts their ass, and changes their life. That's the best part.
Yeah, without a doubt.
All right, man. So are you ready? Well, actually, I want to ask you one more question. Are you?
Yeah.
Are you in the? You competing this year?
I'm definitely doing the open, but excuse me, I'm not gonna change my training. I'm just gonna train an hour a day, and whatever that gives me is what I'm gonna take. And man, that's been difficult. I'm not gonna lie, because I'm just wired to kind of be an all or nothing guy. But I also think it's important for people to see that, someone that was, I guess maybe in my shoes and did what I did, has the ability to do CrossFit for just their well-being and for life. It doesn't have to be this highly competitive, uber consuming piece of my life, but I can do it and enjoy it. So I'm just doing the open workouts once. And even if that means that I got sick during one of them, or maybe I misjudged my pacing a little bit, I'm just going to do the workout once and I'm going to post my score. And whatever that gives me is what I'm going to take. So if that means that I qualify for, a next round, I'll do it. I'm not going to do regionals, even if I were by some odd chance, which I don't think I would. If I were to qualify for regionals, I wouldn't do it just because I had my time there, and I would rather someone else go than me go and just kind of throw my hat in the ring for fun. But as far as the Masters side of things, 35 to 39 is out there, and if I qualify for the next round, I'll do it. And if I, for some crazy, insane reason, if I qualified for the games, I probably, as much as I would do that, I probably would not, largely because right now I'm coaching NorCal, their team. So if I even qualified for the games and the Masters bit, I would err on the side of just going and coaching those guys instead of going to throw my hat in the ring there.
Gotcha, man. Well, I like your outlook on it. Very. I bet it. I can tell it's a little bit challenging for you, like a hard pill to swallow, but you're doing it in stride. It's good.
Thanks, man.
All right, man. So here are the quick fire questions of the show. Are you ready?
I'm so ready.
All right. What's the hardest workout you've ever done?
The sandbag hill run in 2009.
Awesome.
2009. Yeah.
All right. In your opinion, what's the best activity for building mental toughness?
Wrestling.
Awesome. If you could have
shocker.
Well, if you could only have one piece of equipment to train with for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Set of dumbbells.
Perfect. All right, man. All right, now this is the question of the show. Every guest gets this question. What is the best advice you have for becoming a better human? And this is 100% open-ended.
Yeah, so I think that's a good question. I think that largely is us basically having the guts to kind of take a look at ourselves and ask that question of why. I know we talk about that with Icon and training and other podcasts that I've been on. It might be kind of a consistent theme, but I think it's so important that people take a second to just sit back and think about, okay, why do I want to do these things, or why do I want to do this? And that can apply towards so much more than athletics and so much more than, even work. But think about that and like, why do I want to do this? Why do I want to start that business? Or why do I want to try to be the best CrossFitter in the world? Or why do I think I need to be a better mom or dad? Because I really believe that as you start to take a good hard look in the mirror and you ask some really tough questions, that if we're honest with ourselves, that it can help lead to a much more productive and just quality life, and that's something that I think I am still learning, but I have learned a lot as I've walked away from competition is, hey, why would I still want to compete? And what might be on the other side? And now that I'm on the other side, why do I want to just do one workout instead of repost my score? And I don't always like the answer, because most of the time the answer that I have, and I realize it's just because there's kind of an ugly side to me. But I think once you know that, you can start to kind of have some ammo to maybe work against it more effectively.
And I think that's a great answer in general. I know personally, this is something, like you said, something I'm getting better at year after year, and kind of when you have the ability to look back at things and you can kind of realize, like, if you did achieve something, why you achieved it after the fact, and then you start to apply those things forward. And that's one thing that I've come out with massively is answering that question. I know, for instance, like I tried to a few years ago, I tried to pick up the habit of waking up early to have like a morning routine and then like work out and all this stuff. And I just wasn't getting out of bed. Like, alarm would go off, you're like, whatever. Didn't get up that day. And then finally, once it clicked and I kind of answered that question, like, okay, why are you doing this? Like, why do any of it? Like, what are you trying to achieve? I finally answered that question, and I get out of bed every morning now. It's just, that's a real small example, but it's like, it can be that motivator that just like propels you through, the worst of times. And I really love that.
Yeah.
That's the answer you gave today, man.
Yeah, and even still, like, it might be small, but how life-changing. Like, it's the difference between you taking care of your body and not. And if you're anything like me, if you work out, you're probably a more productive father, husband, businessman. You know what I mean? Without that, I'm a whole lot less productive.
Yeah, it definitely keeps that bead, keeps me going through the day.
Yeah, man.
All right, man. So I do want to give you opportunity for anyone listening out there to be able to check out anything you have going on, a website, social, whatever you want to plug. Where can they find out more about you?
Yeah, largely right now, anything that I'm doing is either on my personal social media stuff, which is just C Spealler. That's kind of, my day to day. If people are interested in any kind of programming that we do, I run Icon Athlete, which is just an online program option. We have 4 different tracks of programming and really try to help people identify that why and then have a place for them. So we have exactly the conversation that we're talking about now, people that are just mom or dads that are trying to be better and looking for some guidance and direction and maybe just work out in their garage in the morning, to people that are some heavy hitters and really trying to go to the CrossFit Games or qualify for regionals. So we've got a huge variety of people on there, and I'm just a huge fan of the community aspect. So we're kind of a no ego place and try to provide a lot of resources for people through videos and programming and live Facebook videos, all sorts of stuff, so people can connect with myself and others. And it's been fun. It's been a good transition for me to stay involved with the community on a larger level since finishing competing.
Awesome, man. I'll make sure that I provide links to anyone listening to this. They'll be in the show notes, so you can go check that out. But other than that, Chris, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. I appreciate it, man.
Your best. Losers always whine about their best.